I'm doing good, Chris, and good morning to all your listeners out there.
Yeah, down here in Bozeman. How are things in Helena today for you, by the way?
You know, it's not bad. I guess it's not snowing, but it's a little overcast. I would love to have a little more precipitation for my kayaking next spring, but I think it'll come eventually.
Well, you know what? I have just made a mental note of that, and we will discuss kayaking come springtime for you.
Okay, there you go.
The big news in Bozeman earlier this week, Martin Luther King Day on Monday, Governor Steve Bullock was at Wild Joe's Coffee House and announced an executive order. Basically, it's a statewide non-discrimination ordinance. Is it legal?
Well, it applies only to the state government. That's
Correct.
Important to know. It's also important to know that executive orders on discrimination have been issued by previous governors, at least since 1999. Governor Roscoe, a Republican, added sexual orientation to the state's personnel policy manual as a protected class. So it's been going on for quite a bit. I would tell you that, in reading Governor Bullock's executive order, a lot of those protections exist in various ways, shapes, and manners in different places. For instance, protection of our military personnel. There's some pretty robust federal law about that and state law. I'm a member I'm a volunteer in a group called Employee Support of the Guard and Reserve, which it's a Department of Defense program, and it seeks to kind of be the go-between, if you will, between our here in Montana, our guardsmen and women and our employers, helping them get jobs, helping them keep jobs, reminding employers that they can't, fire someone who gets deployed, that kind of thing. We've had laws on the books protecting women on pregnancy, maternity leave, and all those kinds of things for many years as well. And I think that, one of the big concerns that was expressed in the legislature, I think probably in the debate in Bozeman over the ordinance that came up in the last few years was, if we're going to do these things, you have to also reaffirm freedom of religion as well, which is a protected class. And the legislature wasn't able to work that out. So we just have to be cognizant of the fact that people have conscience rights. And as I said, a lot of this has already been done. It's an election year, and, not to say that these issues aren't important to talk about, but you'll probably see lots of press conferences and what have you in the coming days and months.
Well, with all of that said, and I thank you for clarifying all of that, did the governor, by executive action, create any new protected groups?
I think, again, this has to do, this particular executive order has, lots and lots of things in it. And it was designed, I think, to create some press, which it certainly has, obviously, or you and I wouldn't be talking about it. But as I said, Governor Roscoe included sexual orientation in his executive order, and this again it pertains to state government. So this isn't, as you'd mentioned, I think the term you used was statewide. Well, it's statewide pertaining to state government,
as well as contractors and subcontractors.
Right.
And forgive me, I'd like to switch gears.
Okay.
1450 KMMS, 1340 KPRK on the phone with me, Attorney General Mr. Fox. Sage grouse, we're sending an endangered species to Canada. Why can't we just sell them to our neighbors to the north?
There you go. Well, that whole deal about protecting sage grouse was really a federal manipulation and an example, again, I think, of bullying and overreach. The people that I talked to that were on our statewide task force on trying to come up with a plan to, proactively protect sage grouse so that the federal government wouldn't list it under the Endangered Species Act, feel like they were the federal government did an end around on them because after the decision not to list sage grouse was made, and Montana, as you know, worked very, very hard to come up with a state-based plan to protect the sage grouse, much like Wyoming did. Then the federal government starts making these land withdrawals and mineral withdrawals on federal lands, and it's more of the same. You have to be suspicious of their motives, particularly with respect to this most recent withdrawal of mineral development in over 900,000 acres of federal land. Their own analysis says that these lands have very low to moderate prospects of ever being developed for minerals. And we have sent them a letter, as you know, I think 2 days ago, we sent a letter to the director of the Bureau of Land Management objecting to this withdrawal and pointing out, first of all, they don't have legal authority to do what they did, but then certainly it's nonsense to withdraw something where there's no threat to the sage grouse. The other points I've made to Director Cornsey is that we just adopted a statewide management plan for sage grouse, and that's a comprehensive plan that's to apply everywhere. And now we have these inconsistent edicts and decrees from the federal government that throw that off kilter. There's also a lot of state land and minerals intermixed with these federal lands, and so that really hampers our ability, those of us that are on the state land board, the 5 statewide elected officials, including me, to fulfill our obligations under the Montana Constitution, which, interestingly come from our agreement with the federal government when we became a state, that we would manage the school trust lands in a way that brings the highest and best and sustainable use. And so there are just so many concerns with federal action these days. This is just one more of them.
Attorney General Fox, many people can understand what the governor does and what the lieutenant governor does and the state elected legislators. Your office, for many listeners, is a bit mysterious. And as you just, and I mean that in the most positive way, because, you are in the news, but Attorney General, well, I really don't know what you do. But
have you been talking to my wife?
No, sir, I have not. But I do want to talk about another thing that you've given pushback on the federal government, the Clean Power Plan, in just a second. But how much of your time, or the time of your office, is spent pushing back against the federal government, yet you have to work with the federal government? So is it a give and take constantly between your office and the federal government?
Oh, absolutely. I would say that it's that way for any elected official at any level, even if you're a county commissioner or a city commissioner. You have to deal in Montana for various reasons, not the least of which is we're a state in a republic. But we have federal lands here. Federal law enforcement operates here. We have the border with Canada. The list goes on and on. But to answer your question, yes, a good portion of my time, particularly in the Legal Services Division, which is our law firm, if you will, for the state, is devoted to monitoring federal action at every level, whether it's immigration or environmental regulations or land use policies, etc., and making sure that they comply with the law. Now, a lot of those issues intersect with important policy issues and political issues. But what I do and what our office does is look at these federal actions and scrutinize them for whether or not they violate the rule of law or Constitution, state sovereignty, very important provisions like the 10th Amendment, the Commerce Clause, etc. The president has decided that he's going to go around Congress. That thankfully is something that our founders of our nation and our Constitution said shouldn't happen because of the separation of powers. And we've been very successful in recent years since I became Attorney General, along with many, many other states, in stopping federal action that's illegal. The immigration order, executive amnesty order, we've got an injunction on that. the Waters of the U.S. rule,
Mm-hmm.
which is a EPA and Army Corps of Engineers rule that seeks to take over management of Montana-owned waters. We've got an injunction against that, and I think that there's a pretty good chance we'll get an injunction against the so-called Clean Power Plan, which your Greg Gianforte, who just announced for governor, calls the costly power plan, and that I think his euphemism might be a little more accurate.
Well, and that's exactly what I wanted to go to, is the clean power plan, or the expensive power plan, as you just referred to it.
Mm-hmm.
Montana, I believe, one of 23 states that have signed on to this litigation.
Actually, 27 states.
27 states. Forgive me. There has been a development in this, and where does the litigation stand now?
Well, we have fully briefed a motion made by the states to enjoin the federal government from implementing the rule, and we anticipate there will be an order from the court. We're in the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, which is a federal court, obviously, and we should have an order, we hope, by the end of this month or the beginning of next month, and the case will continue to go on, proceed on the merits, and eventually we'll have probably summary judgment motions. We hope to have a decision on the merits from this court by maybe this fall at the earliest, which would set us up to be in front of the Supreme Court sometime next year. You'll recall that in 2012, the EPA promulgated a rule that has been referred to as the MACT utility rule.
Mm-hmm.
Had to do with emissions from existing coal-fired electrical generation plants. I was not Attorney General in 2012. Steve Bullock was. A number of states sued, saying that rule was illegal for various reasons. They were unable to get an injunction, unfortunately, and so the businesses and others who had to comply with that rule had to hedge their bets and go ahead and do it. That resulted in the closing of the Corette power plant in Billings, Montana, and putting a lot of people out of work. So then just more recently, that case got up to the United States Supreme Court, which struck it down as illegal. And the proponents of that rule and the administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency were real smug about that. Said, well, we may have lost the battle, but we won the war. And there were, I think the number is like 10 to 12 or more coal-fired generation plants across the country had to close because no injunction was issued in that case pending the outcome. So that's why it's important to get these injunctions to, keep the status quo and not put the states through, literally millions, if not billions of dollars worth of work and grief, and for no reason.
It's 1450 KMMS, 1340 KPRK. On the phone, Attorney General Tim Fox. Attorney General, I realize we're already over time. Do you have time for one more question?
Sure.
Is anybody who has been paying attention to the media, there have been a number of bomb threats across the state. Do I need to be worried because nothing has been found? They've been threats and threats alone. Is it been activated to the level that Homeland Security is involved?
Well, we always need to be concerned with threats, and of course, one of those threats was to a school in Butte, and we all take the safety and care of our children and grandchildren seriously. Law enforcement is looking into these. Our office actually is investigating as well. We're working with our local and federal partners.
Because wasn't there a threat to your office specifically?
Yeah, no, I was evacuated. My people were standing out in the cold, and some of them, I told them all to go home because there was going to be a sweep through the building. It was going to take a couple hours, and it was about 3:30 in the afternoon, but some of them didn't have their keys. Law enforcement wouldn't even let the Attorney General back in the building, which is smart. But I think probably the biggest problem with these things is that we don't know if they're credible or not, and certainly we have to treat them as credible until we can prove otherwise. But it desensitizes people sometime as to whether or not to, for instance, leave the building quickly. or at all. And we have in our office, and I'm sure they do at the county courthouses that were affected with these threats, very good procedures, and we have people who are appointed to take a role to make sure everyone's accounted for. So, we take them very seriously. Anyone who is in a building or in a place that receives a bomb threat should take them seriously. And in the meantime, we're going to track down the perpetrators and hold them accountable.
Well, I know it sounds just like a pat cliche, but if you see something, say something. It's a good rule and a quick, easy way to remind residents of the state of Montana. So if you do see something, call local law enforcement.
Absolutely.
I know we're well over time, and I have so many more topics that we'll save for our next month's conversation.
I appreciate it very much, Chris. Look forward to visiting with you again.
Absolutely. You're always a welcome guest here, Attorney General Fox. Thank you for your time this morning.
You're welcome. Thank you.